Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have an amazing show lined up. We have two incredible guests and we're going to talk about XRP and Bitcoin. So representing Bitcoin, we have Da Vinci. How are you doing today?
In the pipe, 5 by 5. You know how I do. When Bitcoin was created, we got a system of money and wealth that ensured that the banking system was not going to enslave us anymore, because that's what the banking system is, a means of slavery, because they're able to create money for free and lend it out to people. And this is an unfair system because eventually it comes to an end, it collapses. And you can see that when the banks get bailed out, because if you're running a fraud, eventually the fraud ends, and then because you run out of money. Well, that's what the banking system did in 2008. They ran out of money and collapsed. But they just got a bailout of their own money that they print for free. So this is the unfair system that Bitcoin came to existence to help us in this world to stop basically the slavery of mankind. Now, XRP, on the other hand, comes in to support the financial services. Right? Ripple is unique in the industry as it creates a financial service platform and network to access and use blockchain cryptocurrency for enterprises and support even central banks with their central bank digital currencies. Now, we all know what dystopian plans they have for those central bank digital currencies. I don't have to go into it, but you know what it is.
Representing XRP, we have Matt. How are you doing today?
Hi, folks. So my name is Matt Hamilton, and thanks to you organizers for organizing this today. And I think it's an important discussion and a good one to have here. So we're here to explore the evolving landscape of cryptocurrencies and focusing on XRP, the XRP ledger, and Bitcoin. I'm going to be advocating for XRP and the XRP ledger and kind of highlighting its potential to revolutionize financial transactions, the financial industry, and address some of the key challenges faced by Bitcoin. Now, as we know, Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency developed, and the vision set out in Satoshi Nakamoto's paper is a very compelling one, right? And it looks at creating a more sovereign, decentralized financial system and currency, right? XRP was the second cryptocurrency developed. It was developed after Bitcoin, created by Bitcoin developers themselves to solve some of the issues they found with Bitcoin with regards to scalability, energy usage, and features that Bitcoin didn't support, like decentralized exchanges, tokenization, real world assets, that sort of thing, right? So XRP and the XRP ledger offers faster transaction times and higher scalability. Unlike Bitcoin, it's not inflationary, it's deflationary, and has a fixed supply, right? So it takes a lot of the original concepts of the Bitcoin white paper and actually implements them in a far more pragmatic and realistic way. So that's the kind of the use case for XRP to be similarly a sovereign decentralized mechanism for payments, similar to Bitcoin, in a way that can be operated outside of banks and the banking system, in a way that can't be censored, or transactions can't be seized, for example, on Bitcoin. So it shares a lot of the same qualities as Bitcoin.
Amazing to have you both on the channel. So thank you from the bottom of my heart to have you here and sharing your knowledge with all of us. Really appreciate. And guys, if you would like to see more of this content, remember to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel to support my journey. So nice, let's jump into it. Matt, what is XRP?
Okay, so XRP is a decentralized, permissionless digital asset, kind of similar to Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies that have come after it, like Ethereum, Solana, etc. So XRP, the original intention of XRP was to allow peer-to-peer transactions in a decentralized, permissionless, censorship-resistant manner, right? So it shares a lot of the same initial goals as Bitcoin and as of the Bitcoin white paper. If you actually read the Bitcoin white paper today, you can see a lot of the same concepts apply to XRP. right? There's a company called Ripple that was then formed, much like companies like Blockstream, for example, in the Bitcoin world, to develop technology based on the XRP ledger. They employed some of the initial creators of the XRP ledger, much like Blockstream employed some of the original creators of Bitcoin. And that company, Ripple, is working to implement XRP and connect it up with the existing financial system to now allow financial companies to take usage of some of the, or take advantage of some of these functionalities that are available in a, like I said, decentralized, permissionless global blockchain. So that's the point of XRP. And it has also spawned a lot. The XRP ledger technology has also been used on some other networks. So things like Zahao, which is launched recently, is another network sort of built on the same technology. And XRP then went on to inspire a number of other blockchains as well. So a lot of the design, for example, of Ethereum was taken from XRP. XRP shares a lot of the same underlying technologies and ciphers as Bitcoin. So it uses, for example, the same block cipher. It uses the same signature algorithm as Bitcoin as well.
This one is for you, Da Vinci. What is Bitcoin?
Well, Bitcoin is a asset that you can use to store your wealth and know for a fact that there's no chance that the government will be able to point a gun at somebody and change the rules of the system. That is not the case with most cryptocurrencies. In fact, probably all the cryptocurrencies, except for the ones that are running with proof of work and has a sufficient amount of proof of work, can be changed. Because you could just, with XRP, point a gun at, I think it was like 35 validators and say, this is what's going to happen. You're going to do it, or you're going to die. So that's it. And it gets done. Now, we've seen this happen with Ethereum already. Ethereum, it didn't have a flaw in Ethereum itself. It was a flaw in a contract that was running on Ethereum that had the flaw. Yet, the government went to Vitalik and said, yeah, dude, you're going to change the program and get everybody's money back. So that was implemented. Now, a major part of the code is that a transaction where somebody stole money, stole Ethereum, or stole some tokens, that's actually been undone in code. It's hard-coded. Part of the Ethereum code is a specific transaction did not exist. That's not possible with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a permissionless system, just like most other cryptocurrencies out there. You can actually program for it and so forth, and you could transfer wealth around. But the key feature is that no one can change the consensus rules in a large enough scale that would actually put us back into a slavery-based system. That's just not going to happen. Whilst every single other cryptocurrencies, including XRP and many others that use proof of stake or other consensus-based algorithm, they're down the scale of basically able to make major changes. For example, as much as people of XRP could say that, well, the supply is fixed and reduced, it can reduce all the time. That is not the case. You can always change the consensus rules and enforce that change on them, right, with enough power, and there is enough power to do so. And that's the key problem. There's enough power right now to force a major change to XRP. It is harder, of course, on Ethereum because Ethereum was not specifically designed to do that, but it can get done, and you've seen it getting done. It got done already. So that was always in the earlier days, but it can get done even now in the future because there's only 21 validators. And so that's where we're at. Bitcoin actually prevents all of that craziness from happening. You don't have to worry because there's no hard forks in Bitcoin.
A couple of things. So you make the claim that somebody could put a gun to somebody or a few people's head within the XRP community and enforce a change there, right? In all blockchains are governed by effectively the majority, right? That's how blockchains' decentralized consensus mechanisms work. If you have the majority who want to make a change, then that change will happen. Now, that is irrespective pretty much of any consensus mechanism, right? We've seen it happen in Bitcoin previously. You say there's not been any hard forks in Bitcoin. Of course, there's been hard forks in Bitcoin. That is why there's Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, and a gazillion others that have fallen by the wayside, right? The only reason that Bitcoin, as you know it, as BTC, is the one that we are talking about now is because it is social consensus that we decide that is the one that is what we know as Bitcoin, right? We could equally have said that actually Bitcoin Cash is what we're now going to call Bitcoin, right? There's no technical reason to stop that. It was a social consensus mechanism. And every cryptocurrency and every blockchain effectively comes down to social consensus. Now, the XRP ledger is more decentralized than Bitcoin in that regard, in the fact that there is a wider number of validators that you would actually need to get to support that change, right? With Bitcoin, the way that the hashing algorithm works and the way that the reality is that there are large pools that are aggregating that hash power, and it is in most cases is the pool operator that directs the hash power. Yes, individual miners can leave that pool, but there's something like, it only takes 2 of those large pools or 3 of those large pools to control over 50% of the hash rate. Right. And so you could go and put a gun to 3 of those heads, or you could go and, cause some other incentive for them to change. Now, remember, they are incentivized by money. That is the entire operation by which Bitcoin works. Whereas with the XRP ledger, validators on the XRP ledger, and to be clear here, there's far many more nodes than there are just those straight validators. Right. You can kind of think of those validators as a bit like some of the larger sort of Bitcoin pools. Right. But each one of them only has 1 vote. So if you were to reach, you need to get 80% consensus, not 51% consensus like within Bitcoin. So if you were trying to hit 80% consensus, then you would need to get 80% of those 35 validators to agree to something. And those 35 validators are only there because they are effectively nominated by the rest of the nodes on the network, right? If the rest of the nodes on the network deem that they are not of importance, then they are no longer of importance, right? They're not listened to. So in that regard, it's much harder to actually make coercive changes on something like the XRP ledger than it would be on Bitcoin, because the incentives are just entirely different there. Validators are not paid to validate. So there isn't that financial leverage that you can use with Bitcoin miners in which you can say, okay, well, we're going to impact your business model here by impacting your miners. And also, another point, Bitcoin has had flaws in it. There was the 184 billion Bitcoin that was created in 2010 due to the value overflow exploit, and Bitcoin was rolled back by Satoshi Nakamoto as well. So that's not a flaw that is just something from Ethereum. That has also happened with Bitcoin as well. And again, this comes down to social consensus. If the social consensus was that flaw was not important, then it would continue. If the social consensus was that the total cap of Bitcoin needs to be, instead of 21, 42 million or whatever, then that would be the will of the participants of the network if they so decided. It entirely comes down to social consensus. Bitcoin's no different to any other blockchain in that regard.
Da Vinci, is there anything you would like to rebate?
Yeah, I would like to point out that, yes, I do agree that Bitcoin did have the fork, and that is true. But there was one major fork that was supposed to be, even Satoshi mentioned, and that didn't occur. And at first I didn't understand why it didn't occur. It was that the block size increased. And then I understood that the forks had to be stopped, because if you allow for changes, then you will allow for a change that, okay, well, this transaction didn't happen. Those kind of major changes, right, that happened in Ethereum. Also, validators are easy to get after, because when you look at the world as it is today, there's many different media companies out there, but they all say the same thing, right? They all repeat the same thing. And you've seen that video out there where all of them repeat the same thing all over again, all across the whole nation of the United States and even in Canada. So this is possible, where it doesn't have to be a gun to the head kind of deal. Now, you said that the validators are not getting paid, but that's true. But there's so little of them, and the validators on Bitcoin are a lot more. There's like thousands of them, over 5,000 right now. I think probably even more than that, and so they're continue to grow. And the reason why that megabyte block size was not increased was specifically so that more validators, which don't get paid, can exist on the network and continue to strengthen the network. And so that becomes ossified, those validators. And so the code itself, the code base itself, gets ossified in, for example, hardware systems such as like switches. Like a switch is ossified with the TCP/IP. We want to ossify Bitcoin into all hardware systems so that you don't change. If the consensus out, if there's a statement to say let's change the consensus algorithm, it's like, well, we can't because we'd have to throw away all our hardware, and so that's its objective, right? And while XRP and many other cryptocurrencies, not just XRP, they have limited number of people that you could actually go to in order to force them. And you don't really have to force. You can coerce them, not with a gun to your head, but with, hey, you know what? We have a lot of cash here. We can print as much as you want. What do you need, right? And right, and yes, some will say no, but there will always be ways to convince them, whether they do it that way or do it through only through the consensus of a few, because really you only need a consensus of a few, in a sense, in order to get any kind of change done in most cryptocurrencies. With Bitcoin, it's a consensus of many.
I would like to ask you, Matt, why do we need cryptocurrencies in the first place?
This is an interesting thing. You can come at this from many different angles, right? I think cryptocurrencies are enabling a whole different means to do all sorts of things that were not necessarily possible before because of the trustless, decentralized nature, right? Previously, if you wanted to take a payment, then you needed some sort of payment processor. You possibly needed to trust whoever was processing the payment, or you needed to physically be there, right? If you go back to, physical cash, metals, Raystones even, right? You had to physically be there in order to transact. And I think cryptocurrencies allow, much more interesting ways in which we can transact as a society, right? So Da Vinci's already mentioned about things like about sort of sovereignty and about preventing government takeover, which I think are very important topics as well. But I think it goes beyond just that. So if you look at stuff, so like XRP is aimed at payments, for example. So whereas Bitcoin is mainly looking at sort of store of value, XRP is mainly looking at payments. What happens when you can suddenly make a payment that costs, a thousandth or a millionth of a cent for a transaction, right? So we're having this conversation right now, and maybe you wanted to do something similar and you had a payment, and it's like, okay, I'm going to do this particular task and you pay me, right? Well, what if that payment could actually be streamed to you live? And this was experiments that were done on the XRP ledger with regards to projects like Coil and Interledger, in which literally, as you're on a web page, the transaction, the money is being streamed to you second by second as that is going on. So it suddenly starts to change the dynamic of things, right? Imagine if you are an Uber driver or something like that, and rather than being paid several weeks after the fact, you're literally being paid as you are driving. The money is hitting your account. You stop driving, the money stops, right? That opens up a whole new mechanism by which we can transact, right? So that's payments. Another area is all to do with decentralized governance, things like DAOs. So this is the area, especially within a lot of like the Ethereum ecosystem as well, and Arbitrum that I work with, currently at the moment. They are looking at ways in which we can have decentralized governance as a society, and we can have new models rather than forming, say, a limited company and a board of directors. You have something like a smart contract and a DAO in which people can have more direct representation and vote on topics that are happening, right? So I think there's a lot of really interesting reasons why cryptocurrencies are necessary, not just for mechanisms such as store of value, but I think going way beyond that, talking about payments, talking about things like decentralized governments, even Jeremy's cat NFT and art, for example, and memes all play a part of society, right? So I think that's there's a lot of interesting reasons for cryptocurrencies.
Da Vinci, would you like to rebate Matt?
Yes, I agree with everything he has to say there. I can't disagree with that. However, what one point I have to disagree with is the point that the basis of cryptocurrency is to prevent government from, as much as you can, at least, not right. Bitcoin's not on a perfect scale of, like, for example, physics, right? The governments can't control physics, right? So the laws of physics. So if we were able to vote the government into allow them to have the laws of physics, to control the laws of physics, the universe would fall apart. We know that because, right, we asked them to solve poverty, and now poverty has won. We asked them to make houses affordable, and houses are now more unaffordable. We asked them to make healthcare cheaper, and healthcare is more expensive. So if you allow them to take over money, well, you know what happens, right? We become enslaved, right? So this is the core principle, right, of good money, is that we get the one thing that everyone should strive for and have to fight for. Actually, we all have to fight for it constantly, is freedom. And Bitcoin allows for people to ensure that they have freedom in the most important thing. So when you in kind of any existence, if I were to drop you off on an island, right, with no one there, you have to do things in order to survive, right? You have to work, right? Or else you're dead, right? If you don't do anything, you die, right? In this society, if I drop you off in society, you have to do something, or else you're going to be on the streets. You're not going to die, probably, right? Somebody will probably care for you and say, okay, I'm going to take care of you a little bit, but that costs money, right? That costs wealth. And somebody had to work for that money. Somebody had to produce something of value. That is the key thing about money, is that it is a key concept of our existence to help us produce wealth and store it for future consumption. We can't store wealth for future consumption in dollars because it gets deteriorated, and our work energy just gets destroyed. So with Bitcoin, our work energy gets stored for the long term and increases, not decreases. And in fact, your work energy is a compounding effect, not a degradation. Every time we innovate on top of innovation. And so our value should go up with our money as well. And that's what cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, provides. It is on a sliding scale of decentralization, which happens to be the very best decentralized system that we could come up right now, whilst everything else falls below that. Everything else falls below Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the strongest one we have right now, and that's why I think Bitcoin is the best cryptocurrency out there, and why we need cryptocurrencies is for the freedom that it will provide us to store our wealth without it being stolen.
I'd just like to come back and say I totally agree with Da Vinci on those points. I think that is a really good reason for cryptocurrencies, and deflationary cryptocurrencies like XRP that have a finite supply that can't be inflated specifically, meet that requirement. One of the biggest issues with Bitcoin is its scalability. It's whatever it is, 7 transactions or 10 transactions a second, whatever it can do. Then every person in the world is going to be, if they wanted to use Bitcoin, they could make 2 transactions in their entire lifetime, and that would be the capacity used up. So the only way in which Bitcoin can actually kind of scale to be usable is to have additional things like layer 2 networks or custodial networks or whatever, that unfortunately, in making it more useful, remove a lot of the very key, interesting concepts that Bitcoin is known for, right? And that Bitcoin uses. So I totally agree. Bitcoin was revolutionary. It was great when it came out. It was fantastic. And I totally agree with what you're saying in terms of its goals. The problem being is that from a pragmatic point of view, it's just not usable in society with the number of people that want to be able to use it, right? The transaction fees are just too high and they're going to get higher as the mining subsidies disappear. Then the fees are going to get higher and higher, and it's going to be your banks, your rich people, whatever, they're going to use it, because the everyday person is just simply not going to be able to afford to transact on Bitcoin. So they're going to have to use layer twos that just, most of those remove the interesting aspects that make Bitcoin unique. And so you might as well use something instead that is far more pragmatic with this approach. And like I said, the XRP ledger was created by Bitcoin developers who understood this. Right, that is why they created the XRP ledger, because they understood this. And one of the first use cases of Bitcoin, of the XRP ledger, was to tokenize Bitcoin. Right, that's why it was the first blockchain to have a DEX, the first blockchain to support tokenization, because one of its early use cases was to tokenize Bitcoin and transact Bitcoin in a far more efficient manner.
Okay, I'd like to respond to that.
I thought so. Go for it.
Say that the same arguments, right? That Bitcoin is too slow. And I can attest that that's not a problem. I can prove it to you, because we can build on top of it and provide a solution that will allow you to do fast transactions and continue to expand it without breaking the bottom layer, the Bitcoin layer. Now, an example of that, because we've done it before, is the TCP/IP. When I was first introduced to studying how networks work, everyone told me that TCP/IP would not be around. They would be using something else, the token ring or whatever. They had many different protocols that were being developed at the time, because they said, well, there's only going to be 4 billion IP addresses, and most of it is going to be not usable. And so there's a lot less of that. So it's not going to pay an IP address for every single person on the planet. On top of that, you can't send video, you can't send audio across TCP/IP, and yet here we are. Right? So there it is, right? And yet it's the backbone of everything on the network. In fact, it is so resistant to upgrade. Upgrade was IP6, right? The interesting thing is on IP6, the IP6 upgrade, it is everywhere. It's on your phone, it's on your computer, it's on every single device, every single switch, every single device around the world supports IP6, but no one uses it because IP4 is so resistant to upgrades, right? That no one wants to change it, right? And this is the kind of level we want for Bitcoin, right? And this is why we want it, is because we've seen what happens when governments take control of money, right? Because the reason why we wanted governments to take control of money is because before banks would do it, they would store our gold and then issue notes for it, and then we'd be able to trade the notes. But then they cheated, right? And they started creating more notes. So government decided to start issuing the money, and now they realized that they could cheat, right, and issue more notes. But it was a little bit more complicated than that. Of course, it is with the central banks coming into play, right? And we don't want to support the central banks anymore. And so I really think that Bitcoin will fix all its problems because we'll build layers on top of it. I'm even considering building something for it, and because it is better than using a system where there is what you said, that the XRP is fixed, but that fixed supply is just as fixed as the Federal Reserve promising not to do QE, or the Federal Reserve promising never to own bonds. It's just a rule that can be changed at any time. Whilst Bitcoin's rules are, yes, you can technically change it, but good luck trying to do it. It's a lot easier to do it on XRP, and that is what my argument is. It's easier, right? I mean, it's possible on Bitcoin, but on a scale of ease, it's easier on XRP than it is on Bitcoin.
Okay, there's a couple of points to come back on that. So one, I don't agree with your thought that it is easier to change on the XRP ledger, right? And the reason that goes back to what we talked about in incentives, right? If some state actor or large actor, whatever, comes up and says, "Hey, that's a nice mining farm you got there. It'd be a shame if something were to happen to it," right? There's a much more at stake there for Bitcoin miners to actually adhere to local rules and regulations, because if they don't, they can get shut down, forced out, moved. We've seen this with China. Those sort of things can happen, right? With the XRP ledger, that is not a problem, because the XRP ledger nodes are not, the validators are not incentivized in any way, and it's much easier to move them because they don't have to have an adjacent power station next to them to keep them going, right? So that is a lot easier. So I would say I dispute that point. I see what you're saying there, but I dispute that it is easier to change on the XRP ledger, because just like Bitcoin, you need social consensus, and that social consensus on Bitcoin is sort of run through the miner process, of which there's a lot of incentivization there for the miners to keep that going, whatever it is, to keep their money coming in. And their interests are not necessarily aligned with users. So Bitcoin miners want a high fee because they want more revenue. Users want a low fee because they want cheaper transactions. Those two things are not aligned. So if you question what a Bitcoin miner is doing with regards to the security of the network, I would suggest that they are probably doing more in their own interests than in the interests of the end users, because their incentives are directly opposite to each other, right? Now, the other thing, you made a really good point about networks, but I don't think you realized that it doesn't work the way you kind of portrayed it. So the network stack layer, you've got the OSI 7-layer model, and at the top you've got applications and stuff like that. You've got TCP at about whatever it is, layer 4, and you kind of come down. And yes, the value proposition with Bitcoin is, well, we can build more layers on top. So we can build Lightning, we can build layer 2 networks, layer 3 networks. I'm working with a layer 2 network right now on Ethereum, right? And layer 3 networks. That's all fine. We can do that, right? But the big revolution with TCP and the internet and networks like that was that you could change the lower level, right? You could change the lower layers. Now, Bitcoin advocates say, well, you can't change Bitcoin. The lowest layer is fixed. But if you think about all of the evolution that's happened, TCP/IP has stayed the same, but it's all the lower layers that have been changed to increase capacity. So we're no longer using modems. We then went to fiber. We then went to ADSL. We've got things underneath. We've got like Wi-Fi. We've got Starlink. We've got a number of different mechanisms. All of the lower levels have changed, from the physical, from copper to fiber, from the protocols, from fixed to wireless networks, from the different Wi-Fi standards that have increased over time, Starlink, satellite. So the point with the networks is the reason they have been so successful is that you can change the lower layers and you don't impact the end users because they don't see that. Now, if we take that same analogy to Bitcoin, what we're saying is that you can continue to use Lightning or some other layer 2, but we can swap out the lower layer, right? So that actually destroys the value proposition of Bitcoin. And what you're saying is that we can just swap it out. We could swap out the lower layer to something like the XRP ledger or Solana or Ethereum or what else that hasn't even been invented yet, and change that. And to the end user, they're not going to notice because they're going to continue transacting the way they're transacting.
That's not what I was saying. I was saying that we can build the layers higher. But I understand your point where, for example, TCP/IP comes in here, and then underneath TCP/IP, right? We changed everything underneath. Is that what you're saying, right? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so with Bitcoin, you could use a layer 2 and change underneath. You could change Bitcoin, right?
I have to agree with that, right? We made things faster underneath, but the TCP/IP stayed the same. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so effectively, right, the same thing could happen for Bitcoin, right? Things underneath it can change, whilst Bitcoin stays the same. So that's the same. That's the argument I'm making.
Not what would be underneath Bitcoin that you would change?
Well, I mean, there are the faster drives for faster computer systems, right? Faster. Right, faster networks, right, which will allow us to actually instantly send transactions. What happens if we have instant transaction settlement across all the network nodes, right? What happens if that happens? You know what I mean?
That can't be done by changing something underneath Bitcoin. That can only be done by changing.
That is what's underneath, is the actual physical layers, right? That's
but
like,
you
for
change
example,
those and Bitcoin stays the same. The Bitcoin algorithm specifically compensates.
Yes, the algorithm stays the same, just like TCP/IP does, right? But all of a sudden, because of a lot of equipment, the physical equipment, everything becomes faster. Bitcoin becomes faster. That's
It
the
won't.
same.
If you change all
thing,
that underneath,
right?
Bitcoin
So,
still does 7 transactions a
so
second and
no,
still
it
a
doesn't.
block
No, it
every 10
doesn't
minutes. In order to change those, you've got to change the parameters of Bitcoin itself, not the underlying. If I suddenly get a miner that can mine 10 times as many blocks a second, that doesn't change the speed of Bitcoin. We've seen that already, right? Bitcoin miners are now faster than they ever were, and that doesn't change, right? Bitcoin is designed to keep the block time constant, and hence the number of transactions per second constant. The only way of changing those is by changing the actual parameters of Bitcoin itself. You can't do that by changing an underlying layer. We've seen that over time. Otherwise, Bitcoin would now be 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times faster than it was, because we've got ASICs running instead of, my desktop CPU running as it was, back in the day when I used to mine, right? Changing the underlying hardware doesn't change the speed or capabilities of Bitcoin.
Okay, I'll give you that one, but I think that we will see Bitcoin actually continue. I still believe that Bitcoin will continue to find ways to improve, whether it's below this level or a combination of below and above. And whilst Bitcoin remains the same, I think we'll see a positive growth in Bitcoin, because we need a system that ensures that the governments and state and any actor can not make changes. And I see, right. I've seen it. I saw that in Ethereum. As soon as I saw Ethereum, I was like, this is going to, there's going to be somebody coming after them and changing it, not because they were on proof of work. Proof of work was not the be all and end all. It was the fact that they were constantly doing updates. They had to do a break-based system. So they always had to update. They had to do a fork every single time. And who's to say, right, that one day somebody says, "Hey, I'm going to pay you enough money to do a specific type of fork," and that's the problem. That was the problem. That's still the problem with Ethereum today, right? It is too close to. It's too easily modified by the powers that be, and that's what we don't want. And so that's where I believe, right? I believe, maybe this is wrong. I want you to clarify this for me, and maybe it's completely wrong. But in this one example is that somebody got their XRP frozen, right? When they tried to dump it, and please clarify that particular point. If you can maybe it's something different.
Yeah, that's no one's ever had their XRP frozen. You can't freeze XRP. There's not the ability to freeze XRP on the XRP ledger. So the incident you possibly are referring to was one of the original founders, a guy called Jed McCaleb, who sold his XRP for USD, and that was then seized on an exchange, right? Had he have kept his funds in XRP, there would have been no way to have seized it, right? Bar going after him with a large spanner, right? Which is the same attack you can do on Bitcoiners. So no, XRP can't be frozen. There isn't any facility or ability to freeze XRP on the XRP ledger.
So only it says here at the gateways, right? That you can freeze it.
So gateways are kind of analogous to exchanges. So gateways are, so the XRP ledger, like I said, was the first network that allowed tokenization, right? So you can tokenize some other asset, Bitcoin, Ethereum, US dollars, whatever, on the XRP ledger. The XRP ledger was the first to have stable coins with US dollars and the first to have gold and silver represented on a network, right? And if you do that, you need to have a gateway that issues that asset. Because that asset is not native to the XRP ledger, it has to exist somewhere else, right? An analogy in Bitcoin is Tether, right? So Tether on the Omni protocol on Bitcoin, for example, right? Tether is issued by a company, and that company can freeze Tether on the Bitcoin network, right? So companies that issue assets on the XRP ledger, they can freeze those assets on the XRP ledger because they issued them. But XRP itself does not have an issuer. Like Bitcoin, it is the native currency of the network. It has no counterparty, right? So because there is no issuer, there's no counterparty, you cannot freeze XRP itself. You can only freeze issued assets And like I said, you can do exactly the same on Bitcoin. You can do exactly the same on Ethereum with issued assets.
All right, so that clears up the next question, which was there was a balance freeze intended for use to freeze feature, right? The in the Ripples Labs document. So basically, you're saying the tokens are freezable, not the XRP itself.
Yeah, issued assets, and the documentation makes that very clear. It says that XRP cannot be frozen; only issued assets can. So if I issue, Matcoin on XRP Ledger, and I give you a bunch of Matcoin, I can, if I choose to enable that, a freeze function to freeze that. And the reason for that being is for compliance reasons. Let's say I issue gold on the XRP ledger. I tokenize gold. There is some physical gold that backs that, right? Say there is 1 million grams of gold on the XRP ledger, and I have 1 million grams of gold sat in a warehouse. That warehouse gets broken into, that gold gets stolen, right? The physical backing. What do we then do with the gold that's tokenized on the network, right? You don't really want that being sold because there's now no backing to it, right? So in that case, you want to be able to freeze an issued asset such that you can more closely correlate it to what's happening in the real world. And like I said, those functions are also in Bitcoin for issued assets on Omni, and also in Ethereum. Most ERC20 tokens have a similar kind of thing that can be frozen by their issuer. But again, you can't freeze XRP itself.
Why do you have to pay for an account on XRP when no other cryptocurrency charges people to open up an account?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So the XRP ledger is account-based rather than UTXO-based. So Bitcoin is a triple entry momentum accounting system. It uses a UTXO model. So it doesn't have an account balance. It has the receipts. So the analogy is, if you ask me how much money I have in my wallet, I can tell you how much money I have in my wallet by counting the notes and telling you. That's the way an account-based model like the XRP ledger works. Bitcoin instead has a triple entry system. So the analogy is, rather than counting the notes, you count the receipts, right? So you say, okay, in Bitcoin, I had $100, or let's say I start with zero. I had zero. I have a receipt here for withdrawal from my bank account from $100. I have a receipt for a spend of $50. Hence, I know I have $50 left in my account. So there's two different mechanisms for dealing with recording the balances. Now, the XRP ledger has an account system, and in order to prevent spam for those accounts, you have to put down basically a deposit to open that account, because there's an overhead, right? The XRP ledger keeps track of those balances in every single block going forward, right? So each block, known slightly confusingly, also known as a ledger on the XRP ledger. So each ledger contains the complete state of the network, not just the latest receipts, right? So if you want to calculate what my current balance is on XRP, you just look at the current block. If you want to look at the balance for my account on Bitcoin, I have to kind of look back through all of the previous transactions and sum it all up, all the differences, right? So the XRP ledger is storing a little bit more information on every single block, because it's storing the complete state, not just the difference of state for each block. So in that regards, there's a deposit because there is a cost to doing that in terms of disk space and to prevent spam. So if you open a XRP account, I can't remember what the current deposit is. I think it's 10 XRP, which is about $5, so about the equivalent of one Bitcoin transaction, to open an account. And when you close that account, then you get the majority of that back again, right, to you. So you can delete your account and get that deposit back again. But it's just held whilst you have the account open to stop people spamming the network with a gazillion accounts. It's not so much an issue on Bitcoin because the transaction costs are so much higher on Bitcoin. You're not going to spam the network anyway. It achieves the same thing, right? With Bitcoin, the transaction costs are higher, so spammers and legitimate users are both penalized. With the XRP ledger, the transaction cost is lower, but you have a deposit. So it's just the spammers that get penalized, not the legitimate users.
If people were to create more accounts, those XRPs are locked permanently, right? So
for the duration of the account being open, you can delete the account and get your XRP back again. If you're no longer using the account, you can delete it and you'll get your XRP back. Yeah.
Okay, I was told that it was gone forever.
No, that's a common misconception.
Makes sense. I have one for you, Da Vinci. What do you think is wrong with XRP?
Well, I think the main thing that XRP is supporting a system of fraud to start off. It is the key thing that all cryptocurrencies, when they came out, is to support the actual individuals and not a banking system. The banking system is a system of fraud that takes money from the individuals in the most vicious way, and then it continues that fraud by using all kinds of financial tricks in order to ensure that gold stays depressed, right, and so forth. Because if gold competes against them, they will lose every single time. So with that, the main thing that's wrong with XRP is that the fact that it's supporting a system that enslaves the whole population, and that is unacceptable because one, we are looking for something to stop using banking system and start using a new financial system that doesn't involve a means of enslaving the population in order for it to exist. Do you know today banks, the banking system equates to approximately, I think it was like some places as high as 80%, like in Hong Kong, but and on average is, I believe it was anywhere from 46 to 65% of our whole economy, worldwide economy. And for the duration of the history of mankind, that was no less than 10%, no more than 10% ever until today. This is it is a leech or a disease on our whole economy and our whole lives that needs to be cut out and removed. And we don't need a support system to help it actually continue to grow even further. And so that's what I feel is wrong with XRP. It is the wrong way to go. But you know what? The banks, there is money there, right? Because supporting the banks and supporting a system of slavery is very financial lucrative, right? So if you want to support the slavery of mankind and profit from it, go right ahead and buy some XRP. Hey, so people will do that with dollars anyway, so why not do it with XRP? So that's your choice.
Matt, I guess you would like to rebate that.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take. I totally agree with you about banks. I don't like banks. Most of the people within the XRP community don't like banks. The reason why XRP was created was to work against banks, right? The fact that banks are centralized, opaque. The whole point about XRP is it's decentralized. It's a permissionless public ledger. I mean, one of the main reasons that it was created in the first place was one of the creators, David Schwartz, had his account frozen. I can't remember. It was either a bank account or it was his, might have been his eBay account. I can't remember. One of the two was frozen, and he had his funds held back. And that was entirely because I believe there was somebody else with the same name that the bank confused him with and froze his account. Right now, again, the whole point about XRP is that is not possible. Right. So I totally agree with you about banks, but that's not anything to do with XRP. The XRP ledger and XRP itself has nothing to do with banks, right? It operates completely independently of banks. And your kind of characteristic of XRP as a fraud is a little strange again, because fraud is a deception, right? A fraud is a deception or trickery. The XRP ledger is a public blockchain. You can see all the transactions on it.
I'm not sure what I didn't call it a fraud.
You called it right at the start. You called XRP a fraud. So the whole point being is that no, XRP is not a fraud because fraud relies on deception, right? Mm-hmm. And the XRP ledger, there's nothing deceptive there. It's all there. You might not like it, but it's not deceptive.
I agree that there's that it is not deceptive, but it's supporting a fraudulent system.
How is it supporting a fraudulent system? Would you characterize Strike as supporting a fraudulent system because it allows transactions between bank accounts with Bitcoin? Yes. Does that mean Bitcoin's a fraudulent system?
Sorry, Strike?
Yeah, Strike allows two people to use Bitcoin or USDT, I think in most cases, I don't even think it uses Bitcoin, between two bank accounts. would you characterize Bitcoin as a fraud because it enables people to transact between bank accounts?
No, I didn't say that Bitcoin's a fraud or XRP is a fraud. I just
Your
said
opening
it.
statement was you see XRP as a fraud. That was
No.
the problem. The opening statement was, what is the problem with XRP? And you said it is a
Well,
fraud.
if I did, I apologize. I didn't mean to say that. I just said that it's supporting a fraudulent system.
How is it supporting a fraudulent system? It allows anybody to transact on it. Now, some of those people might be banks, and you might not like banks. I don't like banks either.
But that's
right?
the focus. That's the focus of XRP. If you Google,
it's the focus of Ripple. It's not necessarily the focus of XRP. Actually, Ripple's main focus is to allow remittance companies to transact between each other and allow them to transact without the need for correspondent banks. Right? The whole point about XRP is to allow people to transact without banks. Right? It's not enabling banks. It's using them without banks. But even if you take the view that it enables banks, it's a decentralized permissionless network. Anybody can use it. Right? If your view is that somebody should not use it, whether you agree with them or not, then you're not actually in favor of freedom, decentralization, sovereignty, all of those concepts that Bitcoin stands for. Right? You're actually more in favor of gatekeeping.
No,
and
I'm not saying. No, I didn't say that. But I am saying. But your focus is that supporting banks. So eventually, if it is that focus, right? If that's your focus, right? Where focus goes, energy flows, right? And so effectively, you will move in a direction that the banks want, because that's the person who's giving you money, right? So if that's the person, if your focus is to support the banking system, they will want certain things that other people might not like. But hey, they're the ones who are paying the bills, so that's who you support.
But the XRP ledger is a decentralized network. The banks can't change the rules, right? The banks can't change the rules. They can choose to use the XRP ledger. That's fine, right? And getting banks to use a public decentralized permissionless blockchain, I'm sure you would agree would be great, right? If the banks used Bitcoin to transact between each other, I'm sure you'd be happy, right? There's nothing wrong with allowing the banks to use Bitcoin to transact or using XRP to transact, right? There's nothing wrong with doing that. That doesn't mean that they get to change the network because the network is decentralized.
I disagree with that because, again, your focus is to support the banks. And so because of that, this is where it is. The focus is that. Well, that's where, if you Google the research, right, and look for what is XRP about, that's what it's focused on.
It's about allowing transactions between people. It's about cross-border payments. It's not about supporting banks.
Between people. It's focused on banks, and that's what I read. What everybody else tells me whenever I talk to them. Okay, so what is XRP all about? What's to support the banks, right? So that they can transact and provide they can transact different assets, right, through gateways. And so, okay, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But, you are going to develop more applications and develop the protocol specifically for them, right? And they're going to want different things than the individuals will want, right? That's all.
And they're going to need to get that voted on. If they want to change the functionality to suit themselves, they would need to get that voted on. Same as Bitcoin, right? If the banks all decided, hey, we're going to use Bitcoin and we need to have this functionality, and the majority of people agree, then it would be implemented. Same as XRP. There's no difference.
And they are the majority with the majority money, and they will be able to get that done.
But the majority money doesn't change the network, right? The banks have more money than Bitcoin. That doesn't mean they can change the Bitcoin network.
But they have the ability, because the way XRP is designed, it can be modified.
Why? Right? How are they going to modify it? Having money doesn't allow them to modify it.
Because there's very few people that they can go after. If you did that with, like, for example, if you tried to just go after minings, which you once said, let's pretend you did that, right? What would you get? Would you be able to change the protocol? No. You will only be able to double spend. That's it. That's nothing.
Miners vote, nodes on the Bitcoin network vote on changes to the protocol. Same as with.
But you have a problem. You have only 1/3 of all the different people that are involved. You have like the miners, the nodes, right, which are not miners, right, and then the core applications, right, the people who are running actual applications that directly communicate with the Bitcoin network. Those people, right, are not going to listen to whatever the miners decide. The miners have decided to, in the past, make changes that were detrimental, and they were shot down. So
And same happened with XRP.
it is not possible, right, to do that with Bitcoin. Whilst with XRP, it is my belief that it is more possible and a lot easier to do that with XRP. And so that is
history shows that to be wrong, right? Ripple, probably the largest player on the XRP network, has put forward amendments that the community has voted down, right? And that has been detrimental to Ripple. They have tried to implement things that the community has voted against, and the network has said, no, you're not doing that, right? So that, shows that in practice, as well as in theory, that argument doesn't hold up, right? You can't just make changes, and having the most money is not going to make you able to make the changes. If it was, then, like I said, the banks have far more money than Bitcoin miners. They could change the Bitcoin network just as easily, right? But money doesn't mean they can change the network. The same with the XRP ledger.
All right. Well, I would like to say that there is evidence of that. Ethereum proved it when it changed, made a major change. It's just there is no major requirement for you to make a major change, right, by government force at this point in time. There is a possibility once that comes, right, then it's like I have to put on my T-shirt.
But I mean, the thing being is that the example you give in Ethereum is because the Ethereum community deemed that to be the right thing. The same with Bitcoin, right? They could have said, okay, 182 billion Bitcoin created out of thin air due to a bug. So what? We're going to continue, right? But the Bitcoin community decided that actually, no, that would not be a good thing, and they should rewind the blockchain. And that's what they did. They rewound Bitcoin and fixed the bug. And that's exactly what happened in Ethereum as well, because it was in the best interests of the users to do that, right? And some people decided not, and they went off with Bitcoin Classic, for example, right? So there's, it all comes down to social consensus at the end of the day. Like I said, it's no different with Bitcoin, because we've seen in the past, Bitcoin has had to rewind the blockchain in order to fix bugs and has forked as a result of differing opinions within the community, right? So there's no difference there.
Matt, I would like to ask you, of course, the opposite question. So what do you think is wrong with Bitcoin?
So, yeah, I mean, I think scalability is as big as issue. Now, bear in mind, just to be clear here, I probably should have said this at the start. I mean, I'm invested in Bitcoin, XRP, Ethereum, Filecoin, a bunch of, cryptocurrencies, right? I don't think Bitcoin is sustainable long-term. I think it's possibly sustainable medium-term, but I don't think it's sustainable long-term because the speed at which it transacts is too slow. And as I mentioned, in order to effectively fix that, what you're doing is putting layers on top of it that you could have just replaced Bitcoin anyway with something else, right? If somebody is using, a custodial wallet on top, because that's the only way they can get the performance they need or the usability they need, then there's no real reason for Bitcoin to be underneath it anyway, right? If you say you use something like Lightning, right, you really need a Lightning channel opened. If I want to pay Da Vinci on Lightning now, I really need to have a channel open to him or to some common intermediary. So either we have to have a set of centralized common intermediaries that we all transact through, which is basically the correspondent banking system that XRP fixes, or I can open one channel in my entire lifetime if we all use Bitcoin, right? Because there's just not enough capacity. So as time goes on, the mining rewards, asymptotically tend towards zero, with the halvening each 4 years. And because the mining rewards are coming down, the cost of transactions, the transaction fees, is going to have to go up in order to compensate for that. And at the end of the day, it's not going to be people like me that can transact on Bitcoin, but it's going to be people with vast amounts of money that can afford to transact on Bitcoin. And I'm going to be transacting on some fractional system on top of that, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to afford to transact, right? So if that's the direction we end up in, my statement is, well, what is the point of Bitcoin in the first place if that's where we're going to end up, right? I just don't think it's scalable long term. And again, things like its energy usage, I disagree with. It uses up vast amounts of energy. And the thing with Bitcoin being is that, like I said, the algorithm is designed to keep block times at 10 minutes. So if energy becomes cheaper, more available, suddenly we get like lots of free, cheap, renewable energy, then the compensation that will happen in the network will just eat that up. The network will adjust its difficulty level so that the hash rate has to go up. So ultimately, all it does is suck up all available energy and just make that effectively more expensive for anybody else in the area. And that's why we've seen, jurisdictions that have Bitcoin miners in, people getting very upset because it's effectively increased the cost of electricity and, effectively driven them out of the market, right? So you've got this weird arbitrage where Bitcoin miners are having to move around to find the cheapest electricity, which in some ways is great. That does, drive development into renewable sources, green sources, but ultimately it's an arms race to the bottom, right? It's going to end up with, at the end of the day, you and I being unable to transact on the network because we're simply going to be priced out of it, and we're going to have to use some other third party instead.
Yeah, I disagree with the points where, especially with the mining. I think if energy is everywhere, basically, it's really effectively free. The reason why we can't find the invention for cheap and free energy is because of our current financial system. Our current financial system requires that we use it to buy assets such as oil, energy. If that disappears, the cost of energy disappears, which is the largest portion of our use case for the money drops in value rapidly. So effectively, in the future, because Bitcoin will be the money, we'll have free energy because energy is everywhere. It's just a potential change. It's just a potential to do something else. That's what energy is. So that potential is every single place in every single area of our planet. You see it on the water, you see it in the lava, you see it from the sun. It's everywhere, right? We just need to convert it, right? So that's not the problem. And the other point that he's made is that we if the energy is free, that means the hash rate will go up and then it won't work. But I don't see how that's a problem. It won't. You can't pump more energy into a specific device to get more Bitcoin. It's just not going to work. All you're going to get is the split of all the Bitcoins that already exist, and that's it, or the ones that are going to be mined. You won't get more Bitcoin. So effectively, you're not going to use up all the energy that there is. Now, the next point that he made is that that pricing of transactions. Yes, that is a sensitive topic because you notice that everybody ran to what's it called, Solana, sometimes online, right? But they don't care because the transactions are cheap, and so that is a key issue for the public. So knowing that there will be a low transaction solution for Bitcoin in the future, it just hasn't come yet, and it will be there. Most people think that you know what, that's not going to happen. Why not use something else, right? And that's fine, but we'll see in the future who's right. Because honestly, we've seen this before. I think that we'll see Bitcoin actually reign supreme in the future. We just need to wait it out and watch that happen. Now, does that mean the XRP is a bad thing, right? Because Bitcoin is it's going to be the money? No, it just means that I think I see the future for XRP is not bright in the sense of if we use it as direct transactions, it will be supported by the banks, and the banks have never been about the interests of the actual people, whilst Bitcoin has been.
So a couple of points. One, I still don't get your point about energy there, right? If energy becomes, right, the entire security model of Bitcoin is based upon energy being scarce, expensive, hard to get, right? Let's say, for example, now I was suddenly able to magic out of thin air a near infinite amount of energy, right? I could effectively start mining, and I could get enough with that energy. I could get enough mining materials. I could get enough miners.
You need materials. Materials are not limited.
But if I have infinite energy, I can get the material. That's not a problem, right?
No, limited, because materials are limited. Materials are limited. Energy is not. You'll run out of materials before you run out of energies everywhere. Materials.
If I have infinite energy, I will be able to get whatever materials I need to do hash power, right? I can do that. That is not going to be a problem, right? If we have infinite energy, then that problem goes away, right? So I can effectively flood the network and take over, and the security of Bitcoin then collapses, right? The security of Bitcoin is entirely based on energy being scarce and expensive.
That assumes that assumes that you could, with free energy, you could produce things instantly. I could just press a button. I all of a sudden have a replicator, and I could replicate as many. Let's replicate as many miners as we want. Beep, 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 beep. And even if we could, you still need time to set that up. There's still time that's required. You can't.
If I have free energy, I can get all of those other things.
It doesn't all of a sudden warp time, right?
But the entire value premise of Bitcoin is that energy is the scarcest and hardest thing, right? And that's what's protecting the network. If I have free energy, then that whole value proposition goes out the way. Believe me, if I have free energy, I can get near infinite materials, near infinite manpower, near infinite funds, right, in order to overtake the network, right?
So
that is not a problem.
Free energy, right? Because once you build the solar panels, you just get it from the sun for free all the time. But what happens? The solar panel degrades, and then you have to get a new one. So it's not free.
Right. We're taking this to an extreme. I totally understand that, and this is a kind of like where this direction is going, right? Is that if you look at the direction towards energy getting cheaper, more available, miners getting faster, more available, then ultimately the end result is that the network, like I said, has to compensate for that and increase the difficulty rating on the network so that it still makes it more difficult, so it still makes it more expensive. And that effectively is just going to price out the individuals from using it, right? The only people that are then going to be able to afford it are the big whales that are going to be able to afford to transact on the network, right? So I don't see, as a long-term solution, I don't see how Bitcoin is going to succeed in that regard. So like I said, short, medium term, okay. Long term, I don't see that ending well.
Well, I still believe that Bitcoin will be the money of the future. Yes, right now there are some issues with the fact that the transaction fees are higher than people would like them to be. Yes, the amount of transactions that can possibly be stored is low, but it has been increased in the recent updates. And I do think that we can build layers both on top and below Bitcoin that will eventually make it faster and usable for everyone around the planet. This system, in my opinion, is the best system because the consensus algorithm is the more difficult to modify, in my opinion, than it is for any other cryptocurrency that's out there. It is as difficult as we could possibly make it. And that's the key thing. We need to make changes to the consensus rules as difficult as possible as we could possibly make it in order to ensure that wealth cannot be stolen from men who decide to take it, because that's always going to happen. And that is the race for every single cryptocurrency, not just Bitcoin, but also all the rest of them. Will they be able to withstand an attack when someone or a group of people decide, hey, you know what, this is in our best interest to take this over and change it in such a way so that we are the only ones that benefit? And that's what happened to back in the days with the Federal Reserve when it came into existence. And now it has taken over and it's destroyed everything. People are now living on the streets. People are suffering because of this system. We do not want to have this happen again. If we were to go back in time and say, stop the Federal Reserve System, we would do so because we've seen the end result. We are here now, and I think the same thing is happening. I can prove the same thing will happen to, I believe the same thing will happen to XRP. They're focused on supporting the banks. The banks will focus on destroying you because that's what they do.
I believe that XRP and Bitcoin and Ethereum and Filecoin and a bunch of others, Arbitrum, etc., Solana maybe, it's not a zero-sum game, right? I believe that there is a use for all of them going forward, and I believe they have their own niche. They do different things from each other, right? So I still think there's value regardless of how you think of XRP versus Bitcoin. That said, XRP was developed by Bitcoin developers to overcome Bitcoin's scalability and energy usage problems, right? It allows faster transactions, more efficient transactions, and doesn't have the escalating energy needs and costs that Bitcoin has literally baked into its algorithm going forward. Now, yes, you can add layer 2s on top of all of these networks, but you are not able to add an additional layer underneath Bitcoin that is going to substantially change Bitcoin, because the entire point of Bitcoin is that it is programmed to compensate for that. So that will not make any difference to Bitcoin kind of going forward, right? So I see a future for XRP long term. I see a future for Bitcoin in the short and medium term, but I don't see it going further forward. I totally agree with Jeremy about banks. I dislike banks. I dislike the whole idea of debt slavery. That has nothing to do with XRP intrinsically. You can do exactly the same thing with XRP and that you can do with Bitcoin, right? What happens when Michael Saylor, becomes an even bigger whale, for example, or even more banks have their ETF funds going into Bitcoin and are incentivizing and driving things via that route as well, right? The same thing can happen on either. The end of the day, all of these cryptocurrencies come down to social consensus and what we decide, whether Bitcoin, BTC is Bitcoin, or BCH is Bitcoin, or BSV is Bitcoin, is entirely a social construct, in the same way that whether or not you are going to use XRP or Bitcoin or whatever is a social construct as well, right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, people are going to use what works. And I believe that for payments, XRP is a better solution than Bitcoin long-term in that regard.
Fantastic. I mean, I would like to thank you both from the bottom of my heart. It's been amazing watching you guys talking about these topics.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
And great to chat to you. Great to meet you, Da Vinci.
Yeah. Sure. Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Fantastic.
Oh, and approval in Dubai for remittances and payments in Dubai this week. So keep an eye out for them. You might find them there.
I saw that. Yeah. I saw that.
Cool.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.